welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Mowbray, and in each episode I will discuss the key topics that impact football coaching from the foundation and youth development phases. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode. James, my friend, welcome to the podcast. How are you keeping?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. Not bad at all. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it, yeah.
100% our pleasure. I know you're busy. We were talking briefly before we hit record, and it's, as always, a busy time, but particularly busy time for you right at the moment. So I really am grateful for you sparing your time to share your expertise on what I think is one of our key topics. It's something that we've spoke about quite a lot over podcasts, maybe more recently as we've got our heads around it. But having listened to a couple of things that you've done, I've seen one of your webinars in particular was excellent. I realised that maybe I don't know as much as I thought I knew, and actually there's a lot more to it than I thought I knew. So thank you for that, and I'm hoping that maybe we can shed some more light on it by maybe asking some key questions around it, if that's all right with you, over the next 40 minutes or so.
Yeah, no worries. The thing I'm very passionate about. It's not an easy thing to do. There's some easy fixes, but something to make consistent is a difficult thing to do, but I'm always happy to talk about it.
Top man. Okay. Well, I think that your hope is here we kind of take a soundbite, if you like, or kind of like just the tip of the iceberg and just delve a little bit deeper. So for those that want to embrace this kind of concept, if you like, if it is a concept, they've got some kind of real takeaways about how they might go about doing it. And that would be great if we can get it out. But first and foremost, if you don't mind, I mean, I know a bit about you because I've done my little background and I've seen some of the things you've done, but just for those that are listening, who you are, what you've done, and you kind of your playing journey and coaching journey so far.
Yeah. So, If I used to be a builder. I was a carpenter when I left school, and sort of decided actually I didn't really like carpentry, and then the recession hit, so I kind of was like, I didn't know what to do. And my dad said, well, you've always been passionate about football. Why don't you find a job in football? So I said, oh, okay. And lo and behold, realised that was quite a hard thing to do. So then decided I wanted to be a physio. So I studied for 2 years with a physio degree, went over to America to coach, like a lot of people have done. And then was physioing at MK Dons, gave a lot of opinions out there in the women's program, and said, oh, we should do this, we should do that, we should do this, blah, blah, blah. And the club were like, oh, if you think you're so good, why don't you have a go? So I said, all right, well, I'll have a go at the coaching. Did a bit of that. And then they offered me a job there as sort of a part-time coach. Did that, then worked my way through into a full-time job at MK Dons in the community trust. I was there for about 7-8 years and left as head of football and women's first team manager, where I was offered the opportunity to go and coach an England age group. So we did quite good work at MK Dons, where we produced an awful lot of England internationals with very little resource or limited resources, as much as the club could spare. They take their women's programme very seriously, but it's a League One, League Two club. In between that kind of bracket, so they only have so much resource to put forward. But we did really good work as a collective group of staff and made some really good international players. And then I went over to England and worked with the England under-15s and picked up a region of the country, so worked with all the players that live in the East. Did that for a couple of years, really enjoyed it, but found it quite slow-paced, and that was fine. I enjoyed it, but I did miss the kind of chaos of club. So Arsenal's academy manager role came up during COVID, during lockdown. So still people at the club I'm yet to meet, and I've been in since September now as academy manager of Arsenal Women, looking after everything from under 10s through to under 21s.
Well done for kind of having a varied journey, but kind of finding the path that you wanted to do. Going from we've had a few variations on the podcast, but no one, I think, from carpentry into coaching. So well done first. Well, I've seen Arsenal's training ground. It doesn't need much carpentry work, but I'm sure it's good to know they've got someone there that can jump in and put a few things if they need to do something. So
I might put a price in if they need anything done. I might put a price in, see what happens.
Well, it must be quite a strange time to take on a new role then, obviously, during COVID. I mean, a lot of people jumped and changed jobs during this time, but you're not getting to meet the team necessarily and having to do things differently. How have you found that?
Do you know, I'm a very sort of half glass full person, and it kind of gave me a really good opportunity to understand exactly where we're at, because I'm seeing it in kind of bits and pieces, rather than just getting dropped into an environment where there's 100 players training over a 5-hour night and I'm trying to meet 15, 20 staff. I kind of saw it bit by bit and have been able to build those relationships to start with. There are challenges with that. for example, we were based at the training ground. We're currently training somewhere else just because of COVID bubbles and stuff like that. That then means that we've lost a little bit of a connection there, or I personally have perhaps not built those relationships with ground staff, with the people on the gate, with the finance team, with those relationships, those softer relationships that perhaps don't make the boat go faster in terms of the football, but are really integral to the relationships that we need. But you know what? It's been okay. We're blessed to hit what they call the elite status, which means we're able to train now. So our under-16s and under-21s remain in training now, which is really good, which is exactly the same as the boys' academy. So that's been good. But yeah, it's been a difficult time in certain respects, but a good time in other respects, just to really build a complete picture of where we're at, which has been a blessing, really.
Well, congratulations on the role. Well done for getting it. And I'm sure you've been massive assets to the whole team. And it's such a good point to make, because I would imagine in these circumstances, you kind of do get positioned in front of the people that are, if you like, are most key. But actually, some of those people behind the scenes are as important, and you don't always get to see them right now because of the way things are. But I've got no doubt that as things hopefully improve over this year, you're going to get on well with the team there and make a big difference to what's going on. So well done.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's what I always think is important, is that relationship with everybody up and down. You need to know who the top of the tree is, and also the person who's going to be maybe cleaning the training ground when nobody's there because of the COVID lockdown. Like, but they're integral to everyone's a cog in the wheel, be it a big wheel or a wheel that helps the big wheel go round. So I always think that's really important. And yeah, I actually have struggled to not build those relationships, because I am kind of a relationship hoarder, as I call it. Like, I like to know everybody, connect with everybody, and understand everybody who makes everything happen. So, but yeah, we'll get there, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. We won't go too much into the whole kind of women's football compared to the men's football, if you like, because we've done that on other podcasts before, and it's almost by the by for what we're talking about today, because it all kind of comes into one. But it's been a good time, I guess, with you getting, like, you with a background in women's football, but that's obviously grown a lot, particularly over the last 5 years or so, I'm going to guess, and seems to be going even more so, not just at the highest level, but even at grassroots. I mean, we're seeing more and more girls get into football, more and more women's football coming through. The quality is getting exceptional. Is it just been a good time to be part of that journey?
Yeah, I think so. I think I sort of, when I started in women's football, so obviously I've worked in boys' academy football, men's, women's first team football, and so on and so forth. When I first got into the women's game, it was just starting to pick up and just starting to kick on. So, but there's a lot of staff I know who have been there in what they call like the dark days, when it was really hard and it was, I don't know, training in a park, and it was, I don't know, 50 people at games. Now it's thousands, tens of thousands. It's 13 million people watching a World Cup semi-final. Like, it's completely flipped, and it is a good time to be in the game right now. I think there's a lot of people that deserve a lot of respect for getting the game to where it is now, when it looked like it might never get to where it is. I feel like I've been a part of that, but a very small part. I feel like a lot of the groundwork was done. I've just come in and enjoyed the best bit of it. But yeah, I think just things like having myself being full-time at the club, having 3, 4, 5 full-time staff that can work across this and help that level of the game, and then the FA have put in a really good growing the game stuff in, and the pathways for players are becoming more multi-dimensional, rather than it just being this one-directional academy program. We've now got roots in from grassroots, from ACCs. You play boys football, fine, stay in boys football, we'll come and find you, rather than trying to fit everyone in the same box. So I think the growth of it's been absolutely brilliant. But like you say, the growth has been from the ground up. It's grown everywhere. We haven't just got £1 million footballers at the top and a game that can't survive at the bottom. We're building it correctly the whole way through. So, and you know what? It is always easy to build a game when perhaps you've seen some of the mistakes that the boys' game may have made. And they were the first to do it. They were pioneers. They're going to do it. And I think it's easy to go, well, actually, they did that and this didn't work. Maybe we should do X, Y, Z and not do that. And we'd learn and evolve from there. So, but yeah, fantastic time to be involved in it. And it's just so exciting.
It's a good point you make, because you do get a feel, not that I'm close to it at all, but just you do get a real sense that there is real sustainability in the women's game, in the sense it's being built on proper good foundations. It's not being rushed. It's not top heavy. It really seems to have the right investment in the right places and generated a really good amount of interest that seems it's got a good future ahead of it. So I'm sure you'll play your part in that.
Hopefully, yeah, hoping to. Yeah.
Well, look, before we get on to the real part of the episode today, just the final real question about you, because I'd like to start this off because I think it's important for people listening to kind of get a feel for who you are. I mean, the topic's going to probably cover some of it anyway, but actually beyond just the topic itself, you know, how would you describe your kind of coaching philosophy and principles? You know, if we were going to observe one of your training sessions or how you maybe influence the coaches you have working with you at the academy, you know, what are the fundamental things that are important to you as a coach?
For me, it's understanding the individual and everything that we do is making sure that every session we put on has a purpose to what it is. What moment of the game in it is it, and what are we trying to create in that moment, or what are we trying to recreate in the training session? When you talk about the word philosophy, if I told you it today, it'd be different tomorrow. If I told you it tomorrow, next year, it might look different, or it might look, who knows. In terms of the philosophy of the football, I think that's become a bit of a buzzword in terms of the word philosophy. But I think actually those key principles and the culture you want to create is, for me, where I probably more measure it. Are we creating a culture that allows players to grow as humans, as footballers, as individuals, their uniqueness, the intricacies of them as a person? Are we helping them? Does our environment enhance them to grow? Are we stretching the best? Are we supporting maybe the ones that need more work? Are we challenging the early developer as well as understanding the late developer, the small player, the tiny one? Are we understanding what they need to be able to be successful? And that's what I hope people would feel if they saw the environment. I'd hope to think that they recognise the environment for the individuality that we're allowing players to have, their creativity, their long-term vision of where they want to get to. For some of our players, the long-term vision is to play for England. For some of our players, is to be a doctor. That's fine. I mean, like right now is a drop in the ocean. It's a snapshot. It's a screenshot of their life. Like that's what I hope that people would feel if they saw our environment. They'd feel a philosophy of growth. They'd feel a culture of growth, and they'd just feel really principle driven around how we're going to help individuals be better.
I saw you speak about a stat on the webinar that I watched, and I think it was 0.012. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a stat stuck in my head. And we've heard statistics about that, and it depends how you look at it. But I think that particular number was relating to, if you took all the grassroots players out there now, how many of those might end up signing a professional contract. Correct me if I'm wrong, James, but I think that was along the lines.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's quite an eye-watering kind of number, 0.012. And I think we know it. We know how hard the journey is to get there. But if you make that your objective, and this is what I think you said on the webinar, which was spot on, if you make that your objective, you kind of set yourself up to fail, aren't you, really, straight away? Where actually, if you look at other parts of what this journey can bring, the football's one bit, but those life skill parts and all the stuff that comes with that, if you focus on that as part of this process, then you got a much better chance of succeeding.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like the way I put, when you read those stats, because they've been around for a while, those kind of stats, but the reason I picked that one in particular is if you did something 10,000 times and you got it right once, would you say nailed it? We nailed personal development. We wouldn't say, oh, that was the one time out of these 10,000 I knew I was right. It doesn't work like that. Well, in player development, it kind of does. And then we sometimes get caught in a trap of creating like players who are good at performing, but perhaps maybe not good at like, and I'm not saying we're not making like we're going to completely create good people, but we can help that. We can teach them how to review, how to reflect. Now, at Arsenal, we know our top 6 or 7 players will probably be in that pro bracket, if not Championship, Super League, top of the National League, probably earning money out the game in our age groups. We then know our next 6 will go National League, maybe a bit lower, and make the game better, I should say. We then, below that, might stop playing at 16. But this still has to be an unbelievable experience that they tell people about. It can't be that horrible time when I didn't do anything but this and I just learned to run and I learned to do it. It can actually be something they learn some core life skills, and they may not present themselves now, but can we develop that? Can we challenge them to be like critical thinkers around themselves and to review and reflect? Can we challenge them to make decisions? Can we challenge them to understand their self and how they improve and how they want to learn and how they can take something but learn it in their own way? So rather than us catering that moment to their learning style, can we create the moment and then them have the skills to be able to learn what they need? Because they're not going to get into employment when they're 22-year-old in an office and a boss is going to say, let me demonstrate how to do. It's not going to happen. It's going to be a list of instructions, and that's how it works, because time becomes more precious and the creativity gets reduced. And yeah, that's what I think about that stat. So like you say, if we measure ourselves against the players that make it pro, we all fail every single week, every single day, every single year. If we measure ourselves against these people being successful, and some will be successful footballers, then we'll be successful again and again if we get the environment right. And that's literally the tip, like the one point I'd hammer home to anybody is that.
Well, let's talk then about the actual kind of theme today, and that's around this creating a player-centered environment. And you've done well if you've kind of dodged this concept over the last 2 or 3 years, because it's certainly become a more, of a spoken about area of coaching, I think, moving the emphasis really away from maybe the coach towards the player. But the danger with something like this is it can be misinterpreted, misunderstood, or it becomes just a buzzword and things. And I'll be honest with you, I thought as a foundation phase, grassroots coach, volunteer dad, nothing special, I thought I was quite good at this. And, and I've seen the benefits of doing some of the things that I've heard you speak about. However, having heard you speak more about it, I realised just how much I wasn't doing and how much more I could have been doing. And I thought I was quite good. So if it's okay, let's talk around that and delve into this thing. But just so we're clear, really, I wondered if you don't mind explaining what do you mean by a player-centered environment? And I think that's important because I don't want to make any assumptions about what you mean by that. So, when you talk about a player-centered environment, what are you talking about?
Yeah, so whenever I have anything like this, I usually use the analogy of a tweet. So can you sum it up in the size of a tweet? And I think I spoke about it in the webinar you may have watched. But for me, I just put it down to putting the player at the centre of everything we do and empowering them to take the responsibility for their own development. Now, that's a really nice way to box it off. But ultimately, is everything we're doing to help that player get better at everything? Of course, we want to make them better footballers because this is football. We know what our role is within their whole development. We fully get that. We understand that we are literally their football developers. We aren't affecting 60% of their life. We're affecting 6% of their life. But can we empower them to take this responsibility of their development? And what I mean by that is, if we can add the right skills to them early on to allow them to review, the round to reflect, allow them to feel like they're the centre of it all, can we then get them to really want to develop and really want to get better and really know why they're getting better and know what they're going to do? So by us putting the player at the centre of everything we do, we just let them take control of their development, and then we can just control around that, and we can create the environment that allows that to happen. I'm by no means exclusive in everything has to be a player-centered environment or an athlete-centered environment, because we need to be coach-led sometimes. We need to design the practice. Sometimes practices have very particular outcomes where we do want to get a physical return, or we want to stress the players in a certain situation, or there might be 6 of them that have turned up because there's been a crash. Like, it can't always be this perfect individualized program. So I understand that both are important, but if we can do more on that player-centered environment, when we do the coach-led stuff, we will get better returns out of it. That's what I believe ultimately.
Brilliant. Thanks for clarifying that, James. And I don't think that'd be any surprise for anybody, but it's good to know how, you see it. Your idea of player-centered environment, because it may be different for somebody else, how they pick that terminology and how they embrace it. So Thank you for the clarification. And again, not to make any assumptions about this, but I wondered what you believe or what you may have seen are the benefits of taking that approach. Before we look into what, practical, some of the things you actually do, what are the benefits from having that approach that you've seen for yourself or you're hoping to see?
So if we can, the benefits to the players is that kind of longer term development, is that moments in the game when we're not there to give them the coaching point, that moment in life when we're not there to give them that bit of support. You'll probably find yourself, anyone that's a parent, doing this all the time. Questions like, well, why did you do that? Or, well, what would you do? Why would you do it like that? Or what did you do it like this for? What were you thinking? You do it all the time in the way that you question, the way that you angle stuff. You don't constantly tell your kids how to do it unless there's something in particular. I definitely know sometimes when I'm telling my little boy to definitely don't do that, but there's times where we do it as parents as well. And by doing that, I think we can create this kind of them to be fear-free about their development, for it to be individualized in everything that we do, and just it will just create an environment that's constantly developing players. On the car journey, they're developing. On the way home, they're developing. On the walk to the pitch, in their drink breaks, they're developing. In the in-session, in-game, they can perhaps correct, review and reflect really quickly and think, oh, I've tried that pass twice. it doesn't work because they're screaming across or they're blocking off that passing lane. I may have to pass into the number 4. They're able to do that in game. And what we do is create the development of these players 360. So all around them, everything from their social, their psych, their technical, tactical, their decision making, everything. But we make it all the time. So the skills that we can teach them here can develop them all the time. Then in turn, in our environment, when they come in, they're ready to learn. They're better at learning. They understand how they learn. And that's the biggest benefit for me, is that.
You've mentioned the environment, obviously, lots already, and it totally resonates with the fact that you couldn't, you need the right environment, I guess. But to you, how do you go about creating the environment in which the players, you can have a player-centered approach? Because I would imagine that there's certain things you need to have in place for the players to be able to respond well to the kind of circumstances you create, if you like. So what things do you have in place in that environment? I don't know if it's core values is the right word, it might not be, but the kind of things that you have that overarch the sessions themselves and the practices really that enable these things to come out where the players feel comfortable, maybe taking some ownership of some of these things you're putting on them.
So, yeah, I think if you were to sort of break that into like training and games as two kind of separate things, if we talk about in training, the environment is, we need to make them feel like everything we're doing is to help them. We've got to build that trust first. If we want a fear-free environment, there needs to be trust. There needs to be a two-way feedback. So I need to be able to take feedback from the player if I want to deliver them feedback. I pulled a tweet out in a webinar I did a little while ago, and it was probably quite critical of the gentleman who put it, but it was basically a tweet that said, players, your coach's job is to coach you. When he talks, you listen, and we do this. And it's like, no, that's not how development works. At no point do we go, oh, all I want you to do is tell me how to do it. Even if people say that, that's not what they want. So I think when you're creating that environment, it isn't an easy fix. You're not going to go from coach doing line drills and giving all this information, then the next day going, right, go play, see what happens. It's not going to happen. So, but what we can do is start by setting up those bigger pitch sessions, by letting the game be the teacher, and then talking to players individually. And then that will hopefully spread between the group. And then it's a one-on-one conversation. So I call, I don't know, little Johnny out and I say, oh, when you're in this session here, can you try and do this? Or what happens when that happens? Or what happens when the next player goes into the forwards? Oh, there's a big space. What could you do? I could step into it. All right, go have a go. And then if I check back in, he might come back to me and say, yeah, I couldn't do it. I didn't get it. Didn't know what to do. Or I can see that. Or perhaps what I see and what he says don't marry up. But what I don't want to do is go, no, I think you're wrong. Okay, well, go have another go. See what happens when you do this and see if I can develop that relationship with him so that he's actually doing the learning. I'm just adding the little prompters. So you need to have that trust. That trust has to be there. You need to have the buy-in from players and you need to have the buy-in from the parents, because it can sometimes be, we have a culture where sometimes we like as parents, we want to know exactly what our child did, what they need to do to get better, and what you said to them at that moment. Sometimes just letting the kids go and play, parents think, I've sit here for an hour and just watch my kid play a game. And you've got to front that as parents. Now, when I've got international experience and an Arsenal badge, and I'm probably going to have a better weight than someone who's got a grassroots coach. When I used to coach down my local team, when I was coaching 11s, 12s, I probably wouldn't have been able to justify that. But what we have to do is involve everyone in the process and explain what we're doing to them before it even starts. I always think in coaching, it's a lot easier for us to say to the players, we're going to do this, this, and this, than trying to explain to the player and parent why we did it. So why did you play my son at centre back when he always plays centre forward? And we might have a really good rationale if we wanted to learn to play the game in front of him. We wanted to understand what it's like to defend against a forward or whatever it might be. But if we try to justify that backwards, the parent might not get it. If they're involved in the process, we can involve everybody in it. So involve the parent, involve the player, make sure we build that trust, and then just accept that sometimes it's just not going to work. Sometimes the session will look messy, and embrace that chaos. Embrace the chaos of it just being a game where perhaps maybe you look back and go, I'm not sure anyone learned anything there, apart from they've all just had a really good time. That might be enough for that hour. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm happy with
most of my sessions, James.
See, now you can just say, no, this is player-centered. This is what it is.
There was a plan, honestly. It is a good point you make, and let's be honest. I do think, and it's not a criticism because the coaching's, what I've seen is always very good when you go to watch the academy coaches, and they do have that they're there for a reason. But the badge gives you a little bit more freedom to be able to do certain things where parents give you the space. But obviously, when you're one of the parents coaching, then you feel an obligation to make it look like you're adding some value. And actually, sometimes the value you can add is more perceptual, kind of almost like undercurrent rather than overt. And a player-centered approach, along with like a games-based approach, I guess, and there's probably some correlation there. I'm sure there is. It looks like the coach is almost giving up responsibility and not embracing it, but actually, it should be the opposite, where you kind of create the facility or the environment so well that you're taking yourself back out of the equation, and the actual sessions doing the teaching for you. Is that how you see it with regards to both a player-centered approach, but also a games-based approach?
Yeah, I think the session is delivering the content and is giving them the environment, as in, like, let's say it's a 5v5 on a 25-yard by 30-yard pitch, whatever it might be, to like a 4-goal game, for example. What is that session trying to get out? That's almost our topic, and we've created that pitch. There is our environment for us then to drop that into players. So yeah, like you say there, at under 10, at under 11, at under 12, this is going to, for someone looking from the outside, they're going to look and be like, what is this? Like, what is this? And it just would be absolute, like, it would just be absolute chaos and just look like someone didn't have any organisation. But if you then were to plot that journey in 3 or 4 years' time, you would see players who are in that game, but self-correcting, setting up formation, recognising the pitches in the game, understanding what's going well and for and against them. To flip this back into sort of more of a real life situation. So I took the under 15s at MK Dons, which then was the under 17s, and then they went into the seniors. So I sort of followed a few players on their journey, albeit I went from 15s to take the senior team and someone else took them for a year or so. They then came into our environment and they were able to articulate to senior players who had been there for a long time on what was going well and what wasn't in a game, and they were diagnosing stuff and they were rectifying, and the players couldn't understand it. Some of these senior players were 30 years old, had earned money out the game for 10, 12 years, and had these 15, 16-year-olds saying, no, that's not. It's because they're setting this trap, or look, they're doing that and we're doing this. And you could see to start with, the players like, who are these? When actually realised there was real sense to it. Now, because those girls have been on that journey for 4 or 5 years, and MK Dons are brilliant at that human side, they came to the seniors and had the skill set to rectify in the moment and had the skill set to understand their development. And even if I would say to one of them called Abby, who now plays in the American League, would say, oh, Abby, what did you see? And she'd give me this unbelievable articulate answer in terms of, well, I thought I saw that 7 was in a pocket. She plays centre back. 7 was in a pocket of space, but they're kind of screening that off. So I tried to open up and go the other way, but it's probably too, and it's really, and I'm like, yeah, well done, Abby. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's brilliant. But that hasn't happened overnight. When Abby was 12, I'd have said, Abby, what did you see? And she'd have said, space. Yeah. They all, like all kids do. Yeah. She'd have said, oh, no, it's not me. I did that and they weren't there. Like, do you know what I mean? It'd been someone else's fault. And I think that just becomes that kind of that kind of long-term body of work. But again, if we're explaining that to the parents at 11 and 12, by the time they get to 14, 15, 16, and they might try to play out against a high press, get it wrong 4 times and concede 3 goals, the parents understand that it's all part of the journey, it's all part of the learning. Yeah, if that makes sense. I probably waffled a bit there, but I think you know what I mean.
It makes total sense, and I can see it. What would it look like in practice then? So, sold on the concept, it's all about the players and trying to create an environment that works for them individually more than necessarily collectively. What are some of the ways in which we could do this then, or what are some of those you go about it with you and your coaches?
So I'm a big believer in learning through the game. I don't think you can teach everything in 11v11, but 2v2s, 3v3s, 4v4s. The more random the picture, the more they'll learn. So if we want to work on 1v1s, rather than having a player passing in and then defending 1v1, let's just make it a 3v3 with mini goals behind them. And then whoever's got the ball, there's a 1v1. It might get past the other player, another 1v1. We might create 50 1v1s in 2 minutes. So I'm a believer in learning through the game. Let the chaos allow it to happen, and taking away some of the anxiety for these players around setting their targets. So get them to set them pitch side just in a conversation, not a sit down review with parents, not a conversation of what do you think you can next, you want to get better at, or what do we think. Just setting them their targets. So what do you want to work on? Do you know what? I don't think I'm very good at this. Okay, well, how do you want to work on it? Well, maybe I'll do this. And they've now involved in a process, and there's no anxiety in it because it's just at the side of the pitch. They're playing football. They come out for 2 minutes, they go back in, and it just takes the anxiety away around doing stuff like that. I think a lot of it is based around the way coaches phrase their questions. So, what did you see is one I ask a lot. What was your thoughts on this, or what happens every time you do that, or what happens if we send another defender here to join the attack? Oh, we're outnumbered. Okay, well, who do you need to talk to? Work it out. And that kind of stuff there, those kind of angling of questions is getting them to solve the problem. We're getting them to communicate, recognise, identify, rectify, and all those words. And also like taking the fear out of it. Play 3v2 and the 2 lose the ball 50 times, but don't worry, it doesn't matter. This is training. This is games. A game is just an extension to our training. Like this is another opportunity to learn, and we want to take the fear out of everything. And then the last thing I'd say, which is probably the hardest one, is to design the session with the person in mind. Now, you'll hear a lot of high-level coaches say you need individualized targets for every player. You need to hit them in every session. I will tell you now that's impossible. It's impossible. You've got 16 players, or anything from 8 to 24 players that we sometimes have. If you can plan a session and can hit every single one of their individual IDPs every minute, you are unbelievable. You should write a book on it because it'd be impossible. And I've challenged that for years, because if we will create opportunities to work on their IDP within every session, because if we do a game and yours is defending 1v1 and mine's attacking 1v1, we may get a 1v1 at some point in that game, or you might get one against somebody else and I might get one. Or it might be weaker foot passing, it just happens to fall to my weaker foot and I can play out. But when we design the session, almost having as much as a consideration of that as we can in terms of the way that we design it. I always plan a session, and my first one when I look at it is, would I enjoy this? Would I enjoy it? And if the answer is no, then I'll scrap it and go again. Because I just think, would I, like, for all other things considered, this is a drop in the ocean in their week where they come to play football. Learning, it's learning in terms of it's similar to school in that respect, but it's without the reins, it's completely unrestricted to go do whatever they want. So when we plan our sessions and when we create these sessions designs, what are we trying to get out, and how can we do that as free as possible? So if it is, I don't know, a session I watched last night, for example, was like counter-attacking. How can we just create a game that is just a game that allows loads of opportunities to counter-attack? Simple as, I don't know, we've got a game, red team versus blue team. Red team must leave a player in the other half. As soon as the blue team attack, we roll a ball into that red player. Then the whole team transitions to the other end and we just get a normal game. And we're hitting their IDPs, and then the way that we help individual players is the conversations. So it will be that one, what was your target today? Oh, I really want to work on my longer range of passing. Okay, well, what pocket of space could you pick up that then means that you can do X, Y, Z with your longer range of passing and stuff like that? And then in those water breaks, in those little stoppages, in those transitions in parts, get the players to take ownership. Get yourselves in groups of 4, get yourself a partner, do this. You may at times want to pick particular things, i.e. you don't want your biggest kid, your earliest developer playing against your latest developer in a 1v1 because it'll be a massacre. But on most things, just get them to split yourselves up. 2 equal teams, just go sort yourselves out, do this and give them the ownership and set up a formation. And then in the next break, well, why did you do that? What did you play a back 2 for? What did you see? We wanted to do this, and so on and so forth. So just that bit of ownership as well. And I always think I get a lot of people that ask me for my session plans, and I send them to them, and I must think they receive them and go, oh, that's underwhelming. Like the details in there, and there's a sheet of detail and what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it and where I want it to go. But 90% of the time, it's probably 3 parts of a session that all mirror the game. They just sort of flow together. They might go off in a different angle. I often say to coaches, imagine your session is in the middle of a noughts and crosses board, right? And it could go in any one of 9 directions. And when it moves there, that might create a new board, and then it's back in the middle of a new one. Because you might pitch your session, and 5 minutes in, you go, whoa, I got this well wrong. Or there's another age group on the pitch you didn't anticipate, and your pitch size has got to be smaller. Or players can't get there. Someone's ill, it doesn't work out. Your assistant coach can't make it. Or the coach of another age group can't, and they get joined together. Like, we can still create these fun, free environments where players can play. But if we get too bogged down on making sure our session hits all these objectives, all we're going to end up doing is ticking off when we've hit them. Oh, good, you got a chance to do a 1v1. Oh, good, he got a chance to do this. Oh, we got it. When actually, we haven't seen if they can or can't do it. We've just made sure they got an opportunity to. And I think that's different, if that makes sense.
How important, James, is reflection as part of having a player-centred approach?
It's everything. I work off a reflection model, my personal self, that I try and install in players of 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day. So notoriously in the first minute, the second I finish a session, if it wasn't quite how I wanted it to, my immediate is, players aren't good enough. Players weren't good enough. Players can't do it. My session was fine. After an hour in the car on the way home, I'm like, no, the player, the international footballers is probably me. Then a day later, I'll watch a session back and go, actually, do you know what? It's probably a bit of both. I probably missed this in the session. Perhaps maybe they weren't all quite here with this, that, and the other. And I'll come to some kind of amicable decision on where the session was at. I try and install that in players, because the minute after the game, heart rate's still up, still hot, still in the kit, still on the pitch probably. Your immediate reflection will be based on whether you won, lost or drew the game, whether you should have won, whether you should have lost, whatever it might be. And then in an hour on the way home, you've probably calmed down. You've had a wash. Well, out of COVID, you'd have a wash anyway. But you're in the car, you're on the way home, and then I think you start to think a bit more rationally. The next day, you're going to get your real honest reflection, but you're going to get an actual level-headed reflection. Whereas the first minute is honest, it's just emotionally driven. And I sometimes will be honest, I'll hunt out those conversations. I'll look and see who's not right and say, what were your thoughts today? And get that real honest, punchy, like, I hated the session. Like, players, I can't stand your session, doesn't make sense. I couldn't do this, or I couldn't do that. Or it was too tight, it was too small. And then when you speak to them on the next night or the next day that you see them, you'll have a kind of conversation in terms of like, what did you think? And they'll have a bit of an honest reflection as well. So I think for players, it's really, really important to teach them how to do that, because when they get to the top level of the game, they're going to have to review and reflect in the moment. They're going to have to recognise pictures and patterns and see what the trap is that's being set, or see what it is, or see what run the forward is making, and review and reflect and think, oh, when it goes into the winger, this centre forward is peeling onto my back shoulder. I need to know that, and we need players that can do that. But at the younger age, we want them to start to learn how to review and reflect. So we set up a really simple form that they have pitch side, which is literally just like, what's my target today? What went well? What could have been better? What am I going to do next time? And that's just an immediate reflection. And then they'll have a game review form that we'll ask them to fill in, which again isn't taxing. It's just 5 minutes of their time, but it just gives us more in-depth context to that. And we're doing that at 11s and 12s. It will be, what went well? I scored. What could have been better if we didn't lose? Like, do you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's useless in terms of us developing them, but it's creating that culture for them to understand that that's something you do after everything. And that's why I think it's so vitally important for players.
And what about peer-to-peer feedback? Would that come under this kind of player-centered approach, or is that something different? And is it something you use or value at all? Not just reflecting on your own contribution to a situation as the coach or the player, but also maybe being able to talk to a teammate about their contribution, or getting feedback from them. Is that part of this, or is it something different?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's definitely that ability to accept and give feedback as well. That's why I talk a lot about multi-way feedback, in terms of to just put this on a player to coach, which is also one we don't always hear. To start with that, when I worked at England, took quite a brave decision to make a feedback form for players. They could like almost rank me as a coach and rate me as a coach and say what I did well and what I didn't do well. Now, I do appreciate that, without like sounding obnoxious about it, I've coached international footballers. I'm an A licensed coach. I'm probably in a position to absorb feedback. Yeah. Like if I was probably at the start of my coaching journey and someone said I didn't like your session, I'd probably be mortified. So I'm probably in a better position now to do that. But what it did was gave me really honest feedback. And one, as you can probably tell here, was you speak too quick. I get that all the time. I can't.
Welcome to that club.
Yeah. When I worked at a club before, they used to call me the machine gunner, because they said my words were just like.
That's just the passion and enthusiasm coming through that. That's all that is. That's what it is.
Exactly that. But getting players to give that kind of feedback there as well, I thought was really important, and also allowing parents to. Now, when I said about in the moment speaking to the players, I wouldn't do that with the parents. I'd listen and I'd say, right, let's have a chat tomorrow, because we want them to be more rational about the feedback. We don't want to have a slanging match on the side of the pitch. The peer-to-peer stuff is something I'm really getting into now. I've started, when I deliver sessions, obviously don't deliver that many sessions now, and they're usually to sort of 16, 17, 18, 20, up to 21s. But I've started doing this thing where when they're in a session, getting players on opposing teams to talk to each other and almost say, explain when it's easy for you and explain when it's hard. And then they'll say things like, oh, when you step too early, I know I can beat you running outside or do this, and get players to do that. And the power of that. And then we sort of creating these individual battles on the pitch of players doing that. That's become something I've really enjoyed doing. And then say, like, when was it hardest for you? When was it easiest? Or what does she do that's really good? What does she do that makes it easy for you? And then the conversation is like, when you've got your left foot facing forward and you're defending me, for example, like, you've got that way, you're really good at that because you sort of can move across the pitch. When it's the other way, I don't think you can move backwards as quick. And the player will be saying, yeah, I agree. And if you curved your run more, I'd be able to do this. And it's really good, valuable feedback. I haven't got into that with the younger age groups yet. I don't think I'd have a model in my head yet. I'm quite strategic in what I like to do, albeit every environment I try to create chaos. I try to be strategic until we get to the session. But I haven't got there with younger age groups yet. And it's something I'm looking into because I think it's powerful. I think, again, I don't know at what point the level of like giving and taking feedback that we've got into these players, they can now take that at 16. Yeah. I don't know at what point we'll be able to. So I'll need to probably look into it more. But you're absolutely bang on. It falls into this. If we can get players to give feedback and take feedback, and it will be so powerful. And hopefully the generation of coach coming through now is accepting of feedback. Feedback's a gift. Like people always say that. And I think that's really important. And a big part of this for me came from a coach called Lydia Bedford. She's England under 18. I spoke to her yesterday. England under 18s, I think she's now. And it came from, I heard her question a player in a game, and I was a volunteer coach at this point, and she was already with England, and I was sort of supporting and just sort of starting my journey on the England stuff. And she said, I played a really good, like, last-minute challenge, really good emergency defending. And I said, oh, she's done well there. She said, yeah, she has. And the way she phrased the question to her was like, it's a really good last-minute challenge, but I want you to identify why you had to be in that situation. What could you have done earlier? And in my head, I was like light bulb, like, whoa, the level of detail, that's amazing. Thinking, like, the girls were under 14, so... and some of them are in the Super League now, to be fair, and this player in particular is. And I remember her saying that to her, and then it stuck with me. And then the player gave this review of the game of what she thought she could have done differently, and it was basically, if she had followed the number 10 in, she could have stopped it at source rather than having to recover and deal with the 9. She kind of did neither. And it stuck with me because when I watched it back and when I kept reviewing it, what the player said was bang on, was absolutely the moment in the game. But what it kind of light bulb moment in my head was, I recognised that Lydia wasn't seeing the moment in the game. She was seeing the moment and then the moments before and after and everything around it and that bigger picture that had got to that point. Whereas my eyes were watching the ball go an unbelievable tackle. She was looking and going, why are we there? We should be here. We should be at this part of the pitch. And that's where it's always stuck with me. And that's where it kind of all comes from me. And all I've done from then is taken the idea and just tried to learn off other sports and see how they do it. And that's one thing I always say to people: don't just try to solve football problems with football books. Don't get me wrong, read Pep's book on high performance environments. It's brilliant, but learn off other sports. England rugby do unbelievable stuff on player centered environments because they've got 15 different positions that have 15 or 13 different skill sets. Do you know what I mean? And it's not like our game where we've kind of got banks, but we've got players that can transcend. If you are a second rower, you're not going to be an outside sector in the next game. Do you know what I mean? You're quite particular skill set, and they've been good at it for years. So yeah, observe it, try to look into it and see what other people do and how other sports do it as well.
What I like about the example you gave there with Lydia and that particular player is the fact that obviously she felt comfortable enough to be able to challenge the player, you know, with an open question in a constructive way, but the player was also in a position to be able to respond to that questioning, which would indicate potentially that they've had a relative amount of time to be used to that environment. Because I would imagine one of the challenges would be if you take on a team, say particularly in older teams, and when I say older, I mean like under 16, 17, 18, so not old, but older. If they've not gone through their foundation or YDP phase, a coaching experience where they've been encouraged to think for themselves and contribute to the problems, if you like, then when they get asked a question like that, they could struggle to respond, and it may undermine them. So I guess you've got to be comfortable with how you approach the players and when, and find out what their background has been up to that point if you don't know, because you might have a wonderful player-centered approach, but if they're not used to that, they might struggle with it. Would that be fair to say?
100%. And a statement I say a lot is like, they're people first, they're players second. And every single person has a unique journey, unique story, unique way of getting to where they are now. I will say that if you as a coach have been very coach-led and you just flip the script one week and just become player-led, they'll struggle with that, I think. I think if they've come into your environment and you've just started coaching them and you are consistent in your behaviour and your manner, and the first time you probably call onto a pitch to ask a player a question, you might see the rest of the players look at you and be like, oh, hang on a minute, what that, whoa. But then it may be that kind of building process, and it's that conversation beforehand that rather than me telling you what to do, I might ask you some questions during the game. And it's that kind of, you could create that environment quite simply. I talk a lot about the easy wins. What can we do straight away? Well, we can ask for feedback ourselves. So say that we're going to give the player feedback, but we want feedback. We can explain that we're going to ask questions. We can recreate the game day in training, so be training games and delivering that information and asking those questions and then transcend it to games. And then we can just build the trust and get to know them as a person. I think there's a lot of stuff out there at the moment about getting to know the person, and I think that's massively important. You do have to be careful though, because you don't know the context of their life. I use a timeline often. If you imagine the timeline's 2 foot long, by the time we get down to what our imprint is, it might be under an inch in terms of that whole timeline. So we have to be careful with the angle of our questioning. I hear lots of things like find out about their parents, their siblings, just be careful with the context of what's going on in their lives. I think personally, you have to be careful with that. I try to find a relatability. I often say I'm 6'1", I've got a beard, and I weigh best part of 14, 15 stone. To a 9-year-old girl, we've got nothing in common. But my dad's Algerian, my family are from the Mediterranean, I've played football, I've got a dog, I don't know, I've got all these things I can relate to. I live in Bedfordshire. Anything that helps me to relate to these people, anything that helps me to connect, builds that initial bridge. One of the players I've probably got one of the best connections with is the Abby player I mentioned earlier. And weirdly, me and her, she broke her ankle in a game, same way I broke my ankle, and it just became a conversation starter. And it just built into something where actually she was in the dugout and injured, and I was in the dugout and injured. She was probably there for, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, sitting there the same. And it just became something that became a conversation starter. And then I started to learn more, and I started to understand more about the players. And every single player, just to check in, especially now, in the times that we're in, when we do all get back to football and everything goes back to normal, just to check in with every single player. Just how you doing? How are things? How you finding lockdown? Like, you enjoying your football? You glad to be back? Like anything, colour of their boots. Sounds so stupid and so trivial, but you're just understanding a tiny snapshot of them, which might give you a bit back. Kindness.
There's always something, isn't there? Yeah.
It is exactly that. Yeah. Exactly that. It's all, I can guarantee there is something you have something in common with every single one of your players. That doesn't mean it's going to be this massive connection and you're going to be, in 20 years' time when they're a pro, you're going to be going, oh my God, they're going to be sending you signed shirts. But it might just get you through.
There's always a hook, yeah.
Yeah, they just get you through that bump in the road, just get you through that when times are tough and when the rocky road for them is really tough. You've just got a tiny little connection where you can just check in. It's not cold, it's a human being. It's someone who might be the same age as their parent or their older brother or their auntie, their uncle, whoever it might be. Someone the same age, just checking in on them in a different environment, saying, you were right, how you doing? I think that's really powerful.
You might have mentioned this then in the bit you just spoke about there, but in my head, I was wondering why we called it a player-centered approach rather than a person-centered approach. Because obviously there's a lot about, person first, player second. And I do get that, but you make some really valid points. Actually, sometimes these players want to come to football to get away from what's going on, maybe, in other environments. So you want to be careful how far down that road you go. But I mean, is that the main reason for not calling a person-centered approach and going for a player-centered approach, would you say, or is there other things that kind of come into play there as well?
I think I just called it a player-centered environment because I knew I could get coaches involved. I think if it went down the person route, I might lose coaches in that respect. And I think in other sports, they call it an athlete-centered approach. I think for me, this is kind of where I often say to coaches, like, I'm a big believer, you know, when people say, like, stay in your lane. I don't believe in that at all. I want performance coaches to be challenging in a session. I want them to tell me you should stop because they're tired. I want physios to be pulling players out. I want goalkeeping coaches talking about the outfield and vice versa. I like that environment. I think the more opinions we have, the richer the conversation is. But the reason for me, I don't call it the person, is I do think our role is we are their football coach. We are their football environment. I think our place is to help them become a better footballer and, of course, that better person that I've spoken about a lot, which I'm very passionate about. But we are, first of all, we're their football club. We will keep them or we will release them based on their ability as a footballer. And I said in my webinar that we want to believe the analogy that you've got to be a good person to be a good footballer. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist. It would be lovely if it did, but it doesn't. And it creates a lot. And I can tell you many good footballers I've had to release and be gutted about, and many like not nice people that I've had to offer a pro to and been like, oh, I wish it was her, sort of thing. Oh, well done. But I think that's why, for me, I don't think it is person, because that's where we're at now. Jodie, who runs the High Performance Centre at St Mary, she calls it a person-centered environment. I don't know whether there's an argument for both ways. I just think by using the word player, we are making it about the player, and in our environment, we are only helping them in our football context. We want to do all the other stuff around it, if that makes sense. I think it does. Yeah, by going with the person, I don't want us to overinflate our role within their lives. I want us to really know our context to them, if that makes sense.
And like you say, if you get to know the player, you're going to know some of the person anyway, and that'll be the bit that they probably want to share more than what you're trying to get out of them. Maybe that's the angle come from the football side of things, and then what comes out of that in addition to football is really in their hands rather than yours, because you don't want to press too hard on some of this stuff just in case you're opening up avenues you don't want to go down. Yeah,
and we have to understand that we are sometimes the role model, and you might be, if you're a male in the female game, you might be one of the main male influences in their lives. They may have conversations with you that would be like revealing and would explain something that's a challenge they might be going on at home or at school or whatever it might be. But also, one thing that always sticks with me is a coach I used to work with a long, long time ago. I won't say their name, but I'm sure they wouldn't mind me telling the story. They said to a player, we'd been told they had an issue, a safeguarding issue, and so on and so forth. And they said, oh, is everything okay? I heard about blah, blah. And the player said, this is the only environment where I don't have to talk about it. Can we just not? And he was like, the coach was like, oh, like completely flustered by it. And I was as well, because I was only the assistant at the time. It was a long, long time ago. And I remember that stuck with me as well, because it was almost her just saying that this is the only place I don't have to talk about the issue. Everyone else asked me. I had to school, safeguarding, welfare officer, the club manager, all that stuff. You're just the only people I don't. Can I just play? And it was like so true. And in that moment, it gave us real context of what we were to them. We were a really important asset in their life and a really important in a difficult time, but just maybe a different avenue than we thought we might need to be. And that always sticks with me.
What a great example. I'm conscious of time, James, but I want to ask this question, then we'll go into the last couple. Just barriers to doing this approach or challenges. What are the things that you would consider as things that would either create potentially a barrier to taking this approach, or some of the things that you've seen have been challenging for coaches or maybe even players to adopt into this approach?
I think it's brave. I think if you do it, it's brave, and you've got to do it all the time. I pose the question all the time of who are you when nobody's watching? I ask that to players, to coaches, and are you going to do this when it's cold and it's wet and there's only 7 of them because 6 of them have got an exam the next day or whatever? Like, are you still the same there? But you've got to have the right people around you. That's players, that's parents, that's other coaches as well, to help you to do this. I think that's really important. The barriers would be when people don't understand what you're doing. I'm a believer in give everybody everything, all the information of what we're doing, and then we can do what we need, and we give them the explanation of what we might do. Even if we don't do it, here's what our thinking was. And I think you just need to make sure that you don't try to do this on your own. You can't just turn up and just try to completely flip this environment in itself. It might be a slow, gradual process that starts with you saying to the odd question, asking questions, more games, making game time longer in session, more bigger pitch stuff, and it's just building towards that all the way. I think your challenges are the time you see them, the people around them that might not understand, or players not understanding, and also, unfortunately, undoing the work of maybe a coach before that told them exactly how to do it and when to do it and where to do it. And that would be difficult. And then being brave enough to perhaps lose games because you're developing players for 2 or 3 years' time, or a year's time, or 6 months' time, so they can do it in the future. That's a brave thing to do, to be quiet on a sideline when you're losing a game and all the parents are staring at you, waiting for you to save the day, where we usually never have the answers anyway. We thought we had the answers before the game, 5 minutes in, we're 2-0 down, and the answers have abandoned us. Like, we're to be brave enough to stand there and keep the same consistency in your manner and approach is difficult. And that's a barrier there. It's not, people use the word ego too flippantly in my respect. I don't think it's ego. I think it's sometimes it's just anxiety. Like, I'm looking at a group of parents who are looking at me going, oi, come on, we bring him here twice a week. We bring her here twice a week. Sort this out. We should be winning. We're better than them. And that's a difficult thing to do. So that's a barrier as well, I think.
And would it be fair to say that if you take this approach, there may be some things that are instant hits and kind of work straight away, but other things may take some time. So you may need to persevere with it. You know, you don't expect everything straight away. And when I say persevere, it may be months, even possibly even years, not necessarily days and weeks. Would that be fair to say?
100%. I think sometimes you may have to accept the groundwork you put in now will help the next coach a few age groups up. That might be the honest answer to it. The simple things you can drop in is by changing your coaching points to questions rather than asking, by having more big pitch work, by learning about your players, and by just explaining the process. I think if you started with that, that would be subtle enough that perhaps nobody would notice. If you're a coach who gives really long coaching points, there's value in them. There always is. If the moment in a game was presented a picture that you think you want everybody to see, so you want to tell them exactly what it looks like now, and just saying, stop, stand still. So when the ball's here, I want this, this, this. They're almost like objective non-negotiables in the way that you're playing, then that's fine. But if you can change the majority of your coaching points to asking questions, and rather it's stopping everybody, you're just talking to individual players about things that happened, the same way that you praise players. Now, we'll praise players like, oh, I love the way you got on 1v1, brilliant cross, well done. The same needs to happen on the reverse of that. The reverse is just a way of like reversing that coaching into, if they don't do that, would be, can you next time see if you can beat me in a 1v1, or can you find a way of getting around the outside to get a cross in? Next time you get it, I want you to try and stay on it until you can make a cross. Something like that is just the reverse of how we deliver. We would never go, stop, stand still, really good cross, well done you, play. We wouldn't do that. Oh, not often anyway. You'd be a brave coach.
You'd be surprised, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that.
James, that's been awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to go into that. It is a key topic, I believe, and it's one of those things I feel personally that if as coaches we can embrace this, understand it, and really look for opportunities to embed it within our coaching environments, not just the practice, but the whole environment, then the players will be more engaged, they'll enjoy the sessions, they'll be more challenged, that they'll value each other more. And like I said, I've done some of this stuff over the years with younger players, actually 6, 7, 8-year-olds, and I've seen the benefits of it, but there's certainly a lot more I can do. And having seen the stuff you've seen before and spoke about today, I know I can do more, and I will, and I'll keep working at it. But it's so valuable. Please keep sharing the stuff you're putting out there. But a couple of questions before I let you go. First, we ask all the guests this. If there was one thing you could change about coaching, what might that be?
Oh, good one. If it's my personal coaching or coaching in general?
Either or, go on, either or.
If I would say in my own personal coaching, I would probably have not tried to get on a race to get to the oldest age groups. I'd have invested more time at younger. So I wanted to be the 10s and the 11s and the 12s all the way through to seniors, when actually I got to seniors and thought I'd much rather be developing kids. And in terms of coaching in general, it'd be to get rid of a lot of these like stigmas on what perfect coaching is. For example, this nonsense I keep seeing of like, oh, you shouldn't have your session plan on you in a session. What are you talking about? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, put your session plan away. I probably check my session plan.
I'll get
once
the
every
shakes
4
thinking
minutes.
about that. Not having it like my safety blanket. Yeah.
100%. Like, we see this all the time. Like, oh, you should know your session. It should be this. It should evolve. My piece of paper in my pocket, I print my session, I put it in my pocket. It's destroyed by the end of it because I've opened it, unfolded it, wrote a note, crossed something out, put it back in, so on and so forth. And that would be a lot of the things I'd want us to get rid of. Like, what works for you? What's your style? As you can tell, I'll be honest, I've got ADHD. I get very excited. I get very involved in session. I love every moment of it. It's like a performance. I love it. And for some people, that is the complete opposite. And I think, well, what works for you is what works. You can't try to be somebody else. And if yours is to not look at your session plan, or some people is to plan on a scrappy piece of paper, one of the best coaches I ever worked with, John Reynolds, played for Scotland. He used to, no word of a lie, they were probably an inch by inch square piece of paper that he'd draw his session on, and he'd pull them out and he'd check it and put it back in his pocket, these little squares. And that was the way he planned. He was one of the best, most thoughtful coaches I knew, and I know, probably still now, to be fair. And I think that's the big thing. Like, you are what you are, you deliver in your way, what works best for you. We all want to get out of our comfort zone, but we also need to be the best version of ourselves as much as we possibly can. So don't try to copy anything else. Try to enhance yourself. Try to involve yourself. Player-centered environment comes quite natural to me, but I also know that I can very easily lose myself and get very coach-centered, where I'm just kind of like, just do it this way, just do it that way, then it'll be done. Right?
But that's okay, right? Because sometimes that's needed too, isn't it? You know, it hasn't got to be all one or the other, has it? And actually having the ability to know what's right for that environment, for that player, that moment, that's a skill in itself. It's having all the tools in the toolbox, not just being good at one.
And then exactly that, and those moments in a game where you might try to support a player, but as you might say to them, ask them 3 different questions, and you look at them and they can't do it. That's fine. Right now, they don't have that in their skill set. What you're asking them to recognise what the number 9 is doing, and they haven't. Like, recognise where she's moving, and they can't work it out. They might need your information, because in that moment, they're drowning in that second. They can't see it. You're asking questions. They can't recognise it. And it might just be, I think she's doing this. What do you think? And just that little bit of guidance. Or it might be that there's a scenario in a game where we've set something up where we want to play out from the back, but if not, we've instructed the goalkeeper to hit the winger, to play long into the winger. We realise 5 minutes in we can't do that. They're cutting it off. We can't kick it as far. It's windy, the pitch, whatever. It might just need a little bit of management from us as a coach, just to say, let's just try and play short. Can you play 5, 6 or 4? Just to get the game going, just to keep the game ticking over, to not crush the player, to not completely destroy the game. We'll just keep the game ticking over. That's where you need to go in that toolbox and say, for this moment right now, for me to maximise this time, I'm just going to have to say how it needs to be done. Yeah. And that's fine. And I think that's really important, definitely.
Brilliant. Well, we asked that question to everyone, and you're the first person to give 2 answers, which is fantastic, and 2 very good answers and very different. So thank you for that. But just what's your plans moving forward? What's your hopes? What are you going to be doing in the next? Obviously, you've got the new role at Arsenal now, but what are you thinking for the next kind of 5-10 years?
Right now, when I get asked that question, I think I don't see myself needing to be anywhere else for the next 5 years. I think with the women's game growing like it is, it's a great time to be in it. And having been there through the very end of the darker days, I think it's now really good to be enjoying it how it is. There's a lot of changes going to happen in the way the women's pathway and youth development set up. So I'd really like to be here to see all of that. And I do a bit of university lecturing as well, and I quite enjoy that, and I'd like to do that a little bit more further down the line. So just sort of keep on with them 2 really, and just making sure I'm one of those people that really likes to be present in the moment now. I would the opportunities will present themselves as and when it's right. I think, I don't know if that's a bit like a dreamery, but I think it will, as and when it's right, it will present itself. Until then, I've got a lot of work to do at Arsenal to actually make what I'm telling you here come to life.
Much easier saying it, isn't it? But no, I'm sure you're going to do absolutely superb. The passion comes through 110%. What a great philosophy to have in life. Just do the right thing now in a moment and see what comes out of that. And I think you can't go far wrong with that approach. Jason, people want to reach out to you. I don't know how accessible. I managed to get hold of your Twitter, and you were great to come back straight away, and everything was very kind of you. Are you happy to share some information, maybe your Twitter handle or something else people can reach out and find out more about what you're up to?
Yeah, definitely. The Twitter handle, which I actually don't know if I know my own Twitter handle, but I think it's James.
I can put it on the show notes. Yeah, I can whack it in if you don't mind. Put it in there.
I'm also happy to put my Arsenal email address down there as well, because I really am a believer in terms of growing this game and sharing our best practices, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing, I hope, in terms of develop young people to be the best footballers and the best people they can be. So I'm happy to speak to anybody via email, via Twitter, whatever works.
Brilliant, James. I'll put those contact details in the show notes. People who got those. I'm so grateful because you work in a different space with, you know, different age groups, predominantly to what we're kind of around, but yet you've been kind of to get up over an hour of your time today to talk through this and help out us as grassroots coaches, predominantly in the foundation or YDP phase, you know, but you know, we're passionate about trying to help the young players we've got access to. You know, they're definitely part of the 0.012%. You know, let's be honest, but they still want to have a good journey. They still want to enjoy the experience. They want to pick up some of this stuff, you know, and they want to have these life skill opportunities too. And there's no reason why they shouldn't, just because they're with us and not maybe at one of the professional academies. And it's people like you sharing your time and expertise with people like me and our listeners that can make that happen. So thank you so much. I really, really do appreciate it. One of the big takeaways for me is going to be talking to the opposition. We do these things called collaborative training matches, and this is under 7s, under 8s, and we get the teams together and we chat about things. And at the end, what we do, amongst other things, is we get the players to say what the other team did really well. If we think about the result, just highlight 2 or 3 things. Now, you know, these are 7, 8-year-old kids, but they do it. They'll step up and they'll say, oh, you know, and they'll know the players' names by then as well from the other team, because that's what kids are like. And they'll say, oh, Jimmy was really good at that, and his shooting was excellent, or the keeper was brilliant, or something. So you can do it with really young age groups too. But I love the idea of taking it that stage further, probably with slightly older players. But, you know, where were the challenges? What made it hard for you? You know, how did you struggle to defend against them, you know, and really get a bit deeper in that. And I love that. And that I would definitely be using that, particularly with our under 11s, under 12, because I think, you know, teams, they'll like that. And they'll like the idea of sharing, you know, the good and the bad, if you like, not just the good, but also the challenges as well that came with it. So
and I just think just make like in the way that you worded there, just make sure that you're wording that like in terms of how do they make it easy for you. So how is it easy? Not like what can they not? Do you know what I mean? Like you worded it perfectly there, like almost that as the player, I'm getting to tell you from my point of view. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about me, and I think that's really important. Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's such a good tool as well, and it can be used all the way up and down. I think if you phrase those questions right.
If you don't mind, maybe at some point in the future, coming back on again, sharing how you've got, once you get your fair table at Arsenal and you kind of get out and meet everyone and you've got a chance to embed some of this stuff. I'm sure they're doing some great stuff already, and I know they were, and you're just going to add to that. Be lovely to hear back from you maybe in a year or so's time and how things are going. If you come back on again.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Whenever's good for you.
All right. Well, look, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Best luck with everything, and we'll look forward to catching up again soon.
Top man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cheers, James.